This video is sponsored by Bitdefender. What's up everybody? My name is Jonathan Casey. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. This is a channel where I like to talk all things tech related. It doesn't matter if it's a smartphone, a camera, or a computer, chances are you're gonna see it on this channel. I deliver content in a unique and interesting format, and I do it every single week. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and click that subscribe button. In fact, in this video, we are talking about a camera, but not just any camera. We're talking about my favorite camera of 2019, which is the Fujifilm GFX100. If you've never heard of the GFX100 or are just unfamiliar with the specs, let me give you a quick breakdown. The GFX100 is a medium format camera, which is a little bit bigger than full frame. Actually, I believe it's like 1.7 times bigger than full frame. You know what? Just hold on. This is the Fujifilm X-T3, which packs an APS-C sensor. Now, in terms of APS-C, think about the A6400 or A6600 because both of those cameras are also APS-C and have the same size sensor. If you look at something like the A7R4 or maybe the Canon EOS R, those are full frame sensors, which are very large sensors. These are gonna be better in low lights, give you more depth of field, so on and so forth. Now, medium formats is just a technical term for big ass sensor because it is way bigger even compared to full frame, as you can see. The GFX100 packs a 102 megapixel sensor, which is just bonkers. It can shoot 16-bit raw photos, and for faster delivery, it takes some of the highest quality JPEGs I've ever seen. Of course, you do have access to all of Fuji's film simulations, minus the brand new one released for the X Pro 3, which is classic negative. If you're shooting in RAW, you could always change film simulations after taking the photo, which is definitely a nice touch, and that's not specific to the GFX100. Considering the high megapixel count, the GFX100 can shoot at up to 5 frames per second continuously. One of the most unique things about the GFX100, specifically when compared to other medium format cameras, is that it packs IBIS, and this is good up to 5.5 stops of stabilization. This is incredibly useful when shooting video, of course, and when combined with its ability to shoot all-eye 10-bit 4K up to 30 frames per second at 400 megabits per second, internally without a crop, you have one of the most versatile medium format cameras on the market. It can also shoot 1080p up to 60 frames per second at 200 megabits per second, which is still pretty impressive. The autofocus system uses a hybrid system with a combination of phase and contrast detection points. In fact, there's 3.67 million phase detection points with 100% frame coverage, which is just crazy. All of this is made possible by the newer X Processor 4, which is very capable, as we've seen with the Fuji X-T3. Finally, you have a 3.2-inch three-way tilting touchscreen, as well as dual UHS II SD card slots. Obviously, this is all gonna come at a cost. The GFX100 retails for $10,000, which may sound steep to some, but when compared to similar medium format cameras on the market, it's an incredible value. All right, so with the specs out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the few things that I don't like about the Fuji GFX100, with the first being the display. It's not that the display is awful, but if I'm being honest, it just feels cheap. In fact, it feels nearly identical to the display that's found on the Fuji X-T3. The touchscreen capabilities, while being much better than Sony, fall short of Canon and Panasonic since you can't browse the menu system by touch. Quality-wise, it's not awful, and it's far better than the one found on the XH1, but again, when compared to the displays found on Panasonic cameras or Canon, it's just not even close. Secondly, while I know this is more of a photographer's tool and meant for landscape and studio style shooting, 4K 60 frames per second would have been a very welcomed addition. The same thing can be said about 1080p up to 120 frames per second, especially given the fact that the X-T3 can already do this. Also, while this isn't so much a negative, I really hope Fuji is able to push out an update to bring the new classic negative film simulation to the GFX100. Finally, one of my biggest complaints when talking about the GFX100 is the lack of a full-size HDMI port or even a mini HDMI port. This camera is really, really big. There's zero reason why we should have to use a micro HDMI port in order to record 10-bit video externally. Micro HDMI has been proven over and over again to be unreliable, and I personally have had several ports break on other cameras. But other than those few things, that's about it. Okay, so that's enough of me being a negative Nancy. With my cons out of the way, let's talk about the things I love about this camera, and let's face it, there's a lot to love about the GFX100. First off, the image quality is impeccable. I'm a far cry from a professional photographer, however, the shots I was able to take with this camera immediately took my photo game to the next level. Even if you don't shoot RAW and are simply using the JPEGs and transferring them to your phone, the quality is mind-blowing. Having 100 megapixels at your disposal allows for zooming, reframing, pulling multiple shots from one photo, or even shooting the highest quality time-lapse your eyeballs have ever seen. Next up, the battery life is legendary. The GFX100 uses beefier batteries versus the X series cameras. They are about double in size and give you about double the battery life. Plus, the GFX100 takes 2 of these beefy batteries, allowing you to shoot for hours and hours. Oh, and Fuji, if you're watching this, I would really appreciate it if these batteries were like the universal standard moving forward. The video quality of the GFX100 is outstanding. Yes, it certainly uses pixel binning in order to shoot with the full width of the sensor, without having to do a massive crop or anything like that. However, I haven't noticed any issues that you might typically get from other cameras when binning is being used. The image is beautiful and has that cinematic Fuji look that we've come to love straight out of the camera. Plus, the GFX100 has the Eterna profile on board, which gives you an amazing image without even really having to try. If you combine these things with the high quality 10-bit H.265 file you get and the 5.5 stops of IBIS, this is a great run and gun camera for sure. With that being said, please keep in mind that the internal 10-bit is only 420, while if you record externally, it's 422 ProRes. Another thing I love is the design and build quality. The GFX100 feels incredibly solid and has a great weather sealing all the way around. It's super solid when holding it, and despite it being a large camera, it still manages to be smaller and lighter than the 1DX Mark II. The LED display at the top allows you to see all of your information, plus gives you the ability to switch to different priority shooting modes on the fly. Thanks to the much larger body of the GFX100, when compared to Fuji's other cameras, you have a huge range of buttons that can be customized within the settings, giving you the ultimate custom experience whenever you want to access something on the fly. Another cool feature on the GFX100 is the built-in Super 35mm full frame mode. This allows you to adapt full frame glass without having a horrible vignette. The best example I can give you is, think about how Sony has an APS-C mode on their full frame cameras to allow use of APS-C lenses. It's pretty much the same thing, but for full frame glass. One thing to keep in mind is if you do use the Super 35mm full frame mode, it doesn't use the entire width of the sensor, so you're not getting the full 100 megapixels, which, I mean, it's totally fine. The autofocus system on the GFX100 is incredible, at least for stills. The IAF and face detection is super boss and very accurate. During my time with the GFX100, I haven't noticed any issues with photos turning out blurry or out of focus. And you can actually focus from a really far distance using IAF. Autofocus in video is good, but it's not amazing. It's on par with the X-T3, which is on the same level as the older Sony cameras like the A6500, A6300, and A7R II. I definitely think it's perfectly fine for most scenarios, but I wouldn't depend on it 100% for every scenario, if that makes sense. So here's the thing, this is a camera that every time I pick it up and use it, I immediately want to do something extremely creative, something that I've never done before. I know that gear doesn't make you a better photographer or cinematographer, but I can't help argue that sometimes you get a piece of gear and you have a weird connection with it, and it pushes you to do things that you weren't comfortable doing before. And ultimately, this expands your creative mind. Maybe it's just me, or maybe it's just having something new, shiny, and fancy, but I feel like this camera has opened up different creative outlets inside of my brain. Possibly? Unfortunately for both of us, Fuji wants this camera back, and now my brain is gonna shrink again and go back to caveman status, which is okay because at the end of the day, I could still implement everything I've learned from using my first ever medium format camera to my regular workflow. Eventually, I would love to own the GFX100 though. Do I need it? Absolutely not, but that doesn't stop me from wanting it. Plus, it gives me a goal and something to work towards in the future. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you have any questions about the GFX100 or want to see more GFX100 related content, let me know down in the comment section. Subscribe for more videos just like this, and I will talk to you amazing, amazing people in the next video, which hopefully will be before the new year, but it might not be, but if it isn't, Happy New Year. Bitdefender Total Security 2020 builds on the popular Total Security suite that many of us have come to depend on. One of my favorite features of Bitdefender Total Security 2020 is the anti-tracker browser extension. What's nice about Bitdefender's extension is that it organizes privacy information. When you click on the extension while checking out a web page, you get a lot of information about the attempted tracking. I've seen a noticeable decrease in website load times and overall a better web experience while using it. If you feel like checking it out, hit up the link in the description for a free 90-day trial to Bitdefender Total Security 2020.